Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. This episode of the New Stack Makers is sponsored by KubeCon CloudNativeCon. KubeCon CloudNativeCon conferences gather adopters and technologists to further the education and advancement of cloud-native computing. The vendor-neutral events feature domain experts and key maintainers behind popular projects such as Kubernetes, Prometheus, gRPC, Envoy, and more. The KubeCon Seattle event is coming right up, December 10th through 13th. It is sold out. You can still get on the waiting list. Registration will open soon for their 2019 events. Be sure to register early for KubeCon Barcelona, May 20th through 23rd. KubeCon Shanghai, June 24th through 26th, and KubeCon San Diego, November 18th through 21. Hope to see you there. Hey, it's Alex Williams, founder, editor-in-chief of the New Stack, here for KubeCon plus CloudNativeCon in Shanghai, and I'm here with Zhengyu He, head of systems engineering group at Ant Financial. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good, good.
How are you?
I'm really well.
Okay.
I'm really well.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about Ant Financial for people who may not be familiar with it.
Yeah, sure. Actually, Ant Financial officially founded in 2014. We actually originated, as a lot of people may know, is actually originated from Alipay, from Alibaba, back in 2004. So we have been actually building financial services for China, for Chinese people in actually last decade.
So tell us about Alipay.
Sure. Alipay, as you may know, is actually the payment. Okay, you can say a lot of people see it as just a wallet app, right? So initially, when you buy stuff from Alibaba, from Taobao and Tmall, a lot of e-commerce website, you have to have an endorsement system, right? You have to have an escrow system. And at the time, the banking, all the big banks don't really want to take the risks of like escrow, like small payments, micro payment, that's what I say. And then that's the moment, and when Alibaba decided to say, okay, let's do our own escrow systems, and specifically for micro payments. That's the origination of Alipay. And then over the years, we find, okay, it's not just like solving the problems for online shopping. We also find there is a lot of opportunities in offline shopping as well, right? When your daily life, you have to pay, for example, pay for your breakfast, right? And at the moment, China is not really a developed country. Like we don't really have a credit card systems, like sophisticated credit card systems. And Ant Financial take the responsibility actually building the national scale payment systems and help people actually not just like the payment anymore, right? It's actually will help you to pay your, for example, the train ticket, like the subway tokens and all of these. And this is actually one of the greatest invention, I would say, in the last couple of years and in China. So you have, it's like we call it like cashless society.
Tell us about that original technology architecture.
Oh yeah, sure. It's the original technology is like you can imagine, right? It's all monolithic, and you can buy off-market softwares like what you can buy, like Oracle databases, IBM mainframes, all the legacy systems you can imagine, which are still running in today's banking system, right? So that's probably the way people are handling thousands of transactions per second. Yes, you can live with that. That's the first generation.
And what was the original Alipay architecture?
It's just a monolithic.
It was all monolithic.
Yeah, it's
right.
all monolithic, and you cannot say it's a cloud or even say cloud native, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
today you're building application architectures for these new payment systems.
Yeah.
When did you start migrating off the monoliths to start adopting newer application architecture technology?
Yeah, when actually we have been iterating through at this year, we actually been evolving into our 5th generation of our internal architecture. We call it like generations. So it's a really painful process. I think every enterprise and large corporations may suffer actually. So I think back in 2007, I think that's the first iteration starts, because at the time that's even before Taobao or Alibaba invented the single stage shopping. That's like it's like the peak day of the year. It's even before that we found our systems cannot sustain the high QPS, the high amount of like transaction per second going through the monolithic architectures we just talked about.
And those monolithic architectures then transformed into more application-oriented architectures.
Yes.
But that's much different than a microservice.
Yes. The first thing you have to solve is actually the
application architecture.
Yes, application architecture.
And that's what you did first in 2007.
Yes. You have to basically take the monolithic architecture and transform into a distributed fashion.
Right.
Right. So over the time, and you will slowly to start realize, okay, you have to solve the problem. For example, databases. Right. You have to solve the bottleneck, because you may know actually last year, because this is single stage, the number has been finalized yet, but the last year's single stage sales, Alipay actually surpassed I think 256,000 payment per second. That's a humongous number, if you can imagine, right? So over the last decade, we've actually been trying to solve the technical problems in the architectural way. The first thing you have to do is basically you have to do sharding, right? Like databases. The complexity actually comes with we can maybe if we have infinite number of money, right? We can buy the highest end of databases like Oracle, for example, IBM, like the supercomputers. We can do that, but the problem is the cost will be so high that we cannot afford our business, because we're doing exactly like a micropayment. The payment is actually less than $0.01, right? So we can do that amount of payment because we can reduce the cost for our systems. And the easiest way to think about it is exactly like how Google build their search engines, right? You have to use commodity servers instead of like really high-end premium mainframes, for example. So that's the tipping point, right? When Ant Financial decides, okay, we need to build our own cloud, all right, before even cloud is a word.
Right.
Right. So we need to build our cloud, actually organize a lot of like commodity servers, and building up our services, databases on top of that.
But they were still virtual machine oriented, weren't they?
Yes. At the time, it's still OpenStack oriented, and now I think till last year we still have virtual machines, but now we are fully containerized.
Now you're fully containerized.
Even for databases.
Even for databases.
That's the, I think, a remarkable thing, because as you may know, a lot of people may see Kubernetes is not really great for stateful workload. For example, databases.
But there is a movement to make stateful workloads much more operable.
Yes, we succeeded in that, and it's fully in production, and just survived in the last week. Last weekend is actually the single state sale. We survived it.
Okay, let's get to that in a minute, because one of the things that I'd like to ask about is this architecture platform that you've built that's called SofaStack.
Yes.
And that is a scalable open financial architecture stack.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is?
Okay, sure. Actually, there's two parts. I was talking about the databases as storage, right? The SofaStack is actually the framework, or you can say the development suite, to actually building scalable applications on top of these databases, and also using that framework can help you to actually easily building up like financial or say production ready, enterprise grade financial applications. So SofaStack is actually a collection of tools, SDKs, libraries, and for you to building up your own production grade software. You have to store the state somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? So first we have to solve the stateful workload, which is we have to have a persistent storage, which in this case is distributed database. And then you start building up the stack, right? You build up the stack and then say, okay, then let's write our own applications. And one of the tricky part to write the application is you cannot just like building random monolithic applications again. So here is Sofa stack kicks in, all right? So it's an environment to let you build your microservices. And in today's world, it's like the serverless fashion serverless way to build your own applications.
A serverless way to build your own applications. Explain that more.
Sure. So what it exactly means is actually you. So we provide a lot of framework. For example, I don't know if you're familiar with Spring Boot.
Yes.
So we provide something similar. It's called a Sofa Boot, to actually let you start your application not from scratch. And
okay.
we also have our own RPC systems and the tracing, logging, and we're about to open the transactional systems, which is also the core logic actually for you to handle transactions. So that's the ingredients for developers to actually to shift the burden of building scalable, stateless applications from the developers to the infrastructure layer. And Sofa Stack is the tool, can help you do that. So Sofa Stack, the Sofa the word stands for Scalable Open Financial Architecture. So it's a collection of frameworks, libraries, SDKs for developers to build your production-ready, enterprise-grade financial services.
Okay, and you were talking about the Sofa Boot, and that is the framework that enhances Spring Boot.
Yep.
Which is which makes it that fully compatible, and that speaks to then the Java heritage, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So Sofa then is that ability then to reach down into the infrastructure.
Sofa is our first move actually to start opening our own technologies we have been accumulating in the last 10 years to actually help help developers, help the community to actually build the financial services, because we see this is still a gap between, say, cloud-native infrastructures and the financial-grade infrastructures. So we want to bridge that gap, and Sofa Stack is the first step.
What's the gap?
The gap is for example, as I mentioned in the past, Kubernetes is still not thought to be the right infrastructure to run stateful workloads, which is not acceptable for financial industries. You cannot just like run your applications in a serverless environment, and how do you handle failures, right? How do you actually switching? So one of the hard requirements for financial services is you have to do multi-region, multi-active fault tolerance schemes. So how do you do that with Kubernetes, right? That's still an open question, I think.
So the open question then leads to then your own work in building out open source projects to bridge.
Yes, to bridge the gap, because there's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of like hard requirement for tolerance, for reliability, for stability, and even for security. And that's the hard problems we have been trying so hard, basically banging our head to solve in the last 10 years. We want to share that experience with the world.
So tell us then about what are those projects you are developing? Oh,
sure. So Sofa Stack is one big step. Actually, I think will help you, for example, exactly like I said, right? So if you want to build a scalable financial services and not like building an application like financial data like 10 years ago, you should use Sofa Stack to start with, because that's basically one stop one stop to start off your application. And then we're slowly actually trying to get more of our own technology off to public. And because we actually want to embrace open source community, and we also want to seek for comments, suggestions, and a lot of help from community as well, right? So including, like we said, is the framework itself, and we are also working on the service mesh, as a lot of people are enthusiastic about the Istio project. We're taking Istio to incubate into our own Sofa Stack, which is called the Sofamatch. We are actually start collaborating with communities on these new topics.
So tell us about Sofamatch then.
Sure. Sofamatch is actually one of the earliest adapter of service mesh, this concept in China. We have been growing our community. I don't know how many members we have, probably thousands. Yeah, we probably have like thousands of members in our WeChat groups, and we have a lot of like offline meetups. And we're trying to advocate for service mesh in China and drive the adoption, because we believe this is a very good architecture, not just like for traditional IT services, because actually for financial services actually solve some core problems, for example, security. Because the delegation part, the architecture itself actually delegates a lot of authorization and authentication problems to the sidecar itself. So the application developers essentially doesn't really need to care about what kind of credentials you need to grant to this application when you build your service, when you deploy into a production, because all of that work will be shifted into the infrastructure and will be handled by the expert. So we see that's an opportunity actually to evolve the financial industry, and especially for financial software architecture.
Okay, and so tell me a little bit about this journey, this open source journey. How are you going to manage the governance so it doesn't become a community of one?
Yes. So right now we are trying to be part of the community. That's the first step, right? We want to actually learn from community. That's why we send a lot of people from my group, from and financial in general. We have a lot of engineers, product manager, evangelist, actually coming and participate in this conference and want to learn from the community first. That's the baby step we want to take. And the second step is actually we want to show what we've built in the last 10 years, right? By open sourcing some of the core systems. This is never done before, like for any financial software companies. So we will actually want to open up the core systems, the core software we have been using actually in production today to the world, and then we can start talking. That's step 2, right? And the third step, how about the governance? We haven't thought about that, but I think a much easier decision will be made is to say, let's have a talk first, right? So we want to talk to the community and we will also want to hear what the community will think about us, whether actually building up a financial services, financial applications on top of cloud native makes sense, right? We believe it makes sense, but we don't know what else will think.
So what's the licensing you're using then initially with these open source projects?
Apache, right? Yes.
Apache
yes.
2.0?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that then allows it then to be carried on in case Ant Financial does not choose to pursue the project.
Oh, I think that's mutually beneficial for both Ant Financial and the contributors, right? So
and that's the first step.
That's the first step.
Yeah,
yes.
right.
Yes.
And so you're taking these first steps and you're looking to bridge these architectures.
Yes.
Right? The financial services are.
Yes.
the financial services community, as you say, isn't really building out open source technologies necessarily.
Not at all.
Then why are you?
Because, as I explained, because that's a way, it's a natural way if we want.
How does that provide, I guess a better question is, how does that provide that competitive advantage for you?
Yes. Let me answer your first question first. Why we are start using open source technologies, right? That's the first question. And then I'll answer why we are open source our own technologies. The first question is very simple. As I explained, if we want to if we were seeking for a really scalable solution, right? Because we have a really, really special use case. Oh, sorry, not a use case. A special scheme in our daily operation, right? We have a huge spike during like huge promotions, like Singles Day, like New Year's Eve. All of these big promotions actually gonna drive the TPS to crazy high. But not the case as not the case for our daily life. So the problem is, then you have to have a scalable architecture. You have to have a really elastic computing infrastructure. All the legacy and closed source, I think closed source was popular maybe 20 years ago. And all the scalable, flexible software is all developing in open source. So that's the moment when we start say, hey, use Java, use Spring Boot, right? For example. That's how we start off the ground. And then I will answer your second question, why we are open sourcing our own technology to the world.
What's the competitive advantage for you? That's my question.
The competitive advantage that we believe is we have the largest financial system in the world. We have a group of talented engineers who is willing to actually compete with the world with our own implementations, right? And we also want to get help from community, and we think the benefit of being open source actually gonna offset a lot of the loss in terms of like competitive advantages.
So you were talking about, Alibaba is known for like these huge online sales, right?
Yep.
What do they call? What are they called?
The huge promotion?
Yeah.
Oh, Singles Day. It's November 11th. Yeah, Singles Day.
Tell us about the volume of Singles Day.
Sure.
What is it? Yeah.
Sure. In terms of the sales number, I don't have numbers. Do you have numbers?
Well, volume in terms of transactions.
Oh, transactions I have, yeah. In terms of the payment, which is handled by Handle Financial, last year is 256,000 payment, or say transactions per second. That's the peak number. And this year I think it's higher, but it's not reviewed yet.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And so then
for comparison, actually Visa, you may know, that's actually the second largest payment network globally, right?
Right.
So the peak number as they reviewed is like 65,000 payment per second.
And so when you're thinking about this type of workload, and this is a little bit of a departure from open source, but how do you organize your teams and and the workflows, and then so that you can have this continuous delivery, because you need to be continuing the application architecture development really continuously to be able to kind of meet these demands, because there's going to be monitoring issues, there's going to be observability issues, there's going to be all kinds of different kind of approaches. I'm curious on how you're thinking, how do you think about that internally, and then maybe kind of how does open source play into that?
Exactly. Just like you said, right? Financial industries, actually, we have, or say, less tolerance of faults. Basically, we need better observability, better monitoring systems. So what we do in financial is we have a separate organization. It's called the Technical Risk Management organization. It's called engineering, actually, all engineers. We have a group of people actually who handles all the failings, like technical disasters, for example, and all the bugs, for example, right? When you run in production, you will see systems fails everywhere, right? So we have a separate organization to handle the failures for the entire stack. But for the CI/CD process, as you said, like a continuous integration, continuous deployment, is actually done by the other team, because the problem is we have to have dedicated resources to actually to handle all of these daily reliability or say productivity related productivity related development.
Okay.
So yes, that's the organization guarantees we have to have.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So this is not going to slow down anytime soon, this pace of payments that are done, through transactions without cash, without credit cards,
right,
simply with with applications and phones. So, and software is at the center of business increasingly, and open source software is increasingly open source.
Yes.
So, as you're thinking about the scale in 2019, what are some of the things you're trying to get ready for, because it's not going to slow down?
Yeah, it's not going to slow down, but actually we are lucky enough because we think our architecture after the food.
Okay, why don't we let's just finish up with the music, because this is not going to stop. So 2019, what would you say about it as the music plays?
Yes, sure. So in 2019, I think we are lucky enough. I think we have a really scalable architectures. I don't think we.
Go on.
Sure. In 2018, I think our architecture can handle actually up to 1 million transactions per second. So I think we have enough headrooms or capacities for us to handle the peak hours in 2019. But we still face some challenges if we want to ask. The challenges including how do we actually reduce the cost further, right? How do we increase the utilization of the clusters? How do we protect our clusters from vulnerabilities, from cyber attacks? And that's gonna be our main focus for 2019, because we want to achieve, that there's a triangle like security, efficiency, and cost, right? We want to achieve all of these three.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time. There's a lot of music here.
Sure.
We have enjoyed this conversation. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
This episode of the New Stack Makers is sponsored by KubeCon plus CloudNativeCon. KubeCon plus CloudNativeCon conferences gather adopters and technologists to further the education and advancement of cloud-native computing. The vendor-neutral events feature domain experts and key maintainers behind popular projects such as Kubernetes, Prometheus, gRPC, Envoy, and more. The KubeCon Seattle event is coming right up, December 10th through 13th. It is sold out. You can still get on the waiting list. Registration will open soon for their 2019 events. Be sure to register early for KubeCon Barcelona, May 20th through 23rd. KubeCon Shanghai, June 24th through 26th, and KubeCon San Diego, November 18th through 21. Hope to see you there. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.